Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this panel. We're going to spend the next hour talking about stress and anxiety and nutrition in COVID times. I love this topic. I think it's relevant to most, if not all of us. And I could not be more excited to be with this panel because these ladies are just jam-packed with information about this topic. And not only information, but stories and ideas and solutions. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the panelists. So first we have Melissa Rolfs. Hi, Melissa. Melissa is a certified holistic health and life coach. She helps busy women break free from stress and emotional eating and sugar binging so that they can feel calm, confident, and at peace. That all sounds good to me. After her own tumultuous history with food, she learned how to deal with the core issues and as a result felt called to go back to school and learn to teach other women how to do the same. She graduated from the Health Coach Institute as a holistic health and life coach in 2018 and is the proud owner of Free to Be Coaching. Melissa, welcome. Anything I missed? Anything you'd like to add?
Thank you. No, I think you covered it. I'm super excited to be here. I'm a recovering sugar addict. And so I'm just excited to share a little bit of my story and journey with the other fine panelists today. So thank you.
You are so welcome. We're thrilled to have you here. And next we have Kelly Cole. Hi, Kelly. Kelly works with high achieving women using an integrative approach to achieve ultimate productivity and mental clarity and focus. I like all those things. Using a personalized 5-step integrative framework, she works with clients to identify and crush goal-blocking beliefs, behaviors, and thoughts, keeping them stuck in the fog and angst. Combining her experience with an integrative approach, she creates a springboard for improved health by optimizing the gut-brain axis to cultivate focus and curate the ultimate calm. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you very much. So I'm Kelly Cole, and I'm also a nurse practitioner with 15 plus years of experience. And I love diving into this a lot. And I love this conversation. So I'm so excited, and I'm so excited to be here.
Well, welcome. We're thrilled to have you here and your perspective. And finally, Rebecca Schisler Marshall, PhD. Hi. She's an expert in integrative wellness, certified life coach and yoga instructor, and mindfulness teacher and researcher, nutrition nut, which I love, and public speaker. As an associate professor at the University of Georgia and the founder of Centered Living, she helps women who have tried everything to get unstuck, feel better, and have more energy. Yes to all that. Rebecca helps women using a novel approach called the Centered Wellness Framework, which is the basis for the Whole Body Upgrade course and podcast. And in addition, Rebecca trains coaches through the Centered Wellness Certification Program. Hello, Rebecca.
Hello. I love hearing all of these people doing all these wonderful things. Kelly, I'm also a speech language pathologist, so I've been in the health care industry for many years. So I love that we have that common thread.
That's so great. And finally, I'll introduce myself. I'm Jill Baccaro, your moderator, an integrative health practitioner and owner of Wellness Riot, where I work with clients one-on-one and in groups. My passion is helping busy men and women shift from blah to balanced, especially those with digestive upset, skin issues, low energy, poor sleep, mood fluctuations. I think that's everyone. I believe in identifying the root cause of the issue and then taking small but sustainable steps towards a solution. I like to nudge you out of your comfort zone without adding stress or turning your world upside down. And I also have a lot of tricks up my sleeve to incorporate kids into the healthy mix because I've seen firsthand how the rate of success increases when the whole family is on board. So that is us. And before we dive in officially, I just want to let everyone know that you can type questions in the chat. There's an event chat and a session chat. So you'll see to get your questions answered, put them in the session chat. And then I'm going to do my best to keep tabs on those as we go along. The plan is to leave time at the end to answer and address all questions. So if we don't get to them right away, we'll get to them at the end, or we may even cover your questions as we go through the discussion. So let's get started. What I would love to do is start by defining stress and define. So Melissa, can you give us your definition of nutrition. Like, what is it? Because I think it's helpful for us to be on the same page.
Yeah, I think nutrition is basically how you nourish your body, what you're putting in and on it in terms of food and also your personal care products. Like our body is a living thing. And so what we put in and on it matters. So that's how I would define it.
I love it. And Rebecca, you can either add on to that, but I'd also like to get your take on what is stress.
Yeah, stress. So I love what Melissa said, just adding in that, like what we put on our body too, like that piece is a lot of things that people have this kind of very limited view, and they may not see that reaction to or that connection with what stress is, right? So stress is when there are events that are happening in our lives that basically stimulate our nervous system to tell cortisol to be released. And we have the opportunity to use all of these different tools and techniques to be able to influence stress in our lives, whether it's affecting our nervous system, using our brain and our thoughts, using our way that we can deal with emotions, or the food that we're putting in our body to be able to mitigate how we're dealing with stress.
Awesome. I agree with all of that. And Kelly, so Rebecca kind of alluded to the connection between nutrition and stress. So what would you say, or, is there a connection? Like, what is it?
Yeah. So I believe that it's all interconnected. And I think that the more that we focus on these two key areas of stress and nutrition, that we can optimize kind of the whole cycle. And the way that I see the cycle is usually when we have these stressors, we're meant to react to them, have our response, and which is normal. And then our body's supposed to self-regulate and come back down to a place where you're calm again. A lot of times in society nowadays, we don't get there. We stay stuck in this stress and we're stressed. And then our levels kind of continue up. And that cortisol response, as Rebecca said, can wreck us a little bit. So it causes inflammation in our body. It can disrupt processes that are normal, and it can disrupt our gut too. And so that's where the nutrition piece comes into play. When Melissa was talking about nourishing ourselves, I really talk a lot about how our bodies are nourished. And when we're talking about using that nourishment, we're also talking about leaving room in our gut to be able to have it function as in the best way that it can. And when it's functioning the best way that it can, it's making all of those calming and happy neurotransmitters that send the signals back to our brain and kind of create this loop for us to be able to keep the cycle going. So keeping us happy, or being able to manage and get back down to a level of calm again. And so, yep, that's my view of that connection, and approaching that discussion with places where we have tools, like Rebecca said, for stress, and worrying about how we're eating and how we're nourishing ourselves can, on both sides of that, can really help to make sure we're doing the best we can for ourselves to bring ourselves back down and be in a place where you can be stressed and then calm back down.
Excellent. I think what is important that you pointed out, or what's important to point out, is that our body is doing the best it can at all times. It thinks it's doing the best it can, which is like, this person needs to survive. That's our number one goal, right? And then it really just depends on the factors that are influencing it, which have changed over time, not just this last year, but over decades and hundreds of years. So I always think that's important to keep in mind, is like our body's doing the best it can considering the circumstances. Because I think sometimes, and that's one of my questions to you all, is, what we defined here and what we said, like, how do we think that might be different than how the rest of the world looks at it, or how most people look at it? And I think there's a tendency to be like, why is my body doing this? Like, it's wrong. Like, what's wrong? Why is it misbehaving? And it's like, it really is reacting and responding in the most appropriate way that it knows how. So I'll leave it to anybody who wants to jump in on whatever we just discussed here as far as stress and nutrition. Like, how do you think that differs compared to what like a person might think who's not in our industry and studies it?
before I got into it, Jill, I was really uninformed on the impact that food had on mood and overall health. I had just always associated food with weight. And that was my mindset, was what I eat will affect my weight. But it wasn't until my own personal journey that I discovered, oh my gosh, food is nourishment. It is healing. Like, there are so many properties that food can do beyond just weight. It affects energy. It affects mood. It affects mindset. Our daughter has sensory processing, so she's on the spectrum. Food impacts that. Like, food is so profound and it matters in every area of your life beyond your weight. And I just want people to know that.
Yes, I think that's really important. Great point.
Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree, Melissa. It's interesting because that's part of what started me into my journey. Is my older son has sensory processing disorder. So that was like, wait, if he eats this, then he's screaming and kicking to get in the bathtub. Like, what is this sorcery that is happening? I don't understand, because most of the world isn't educated. Like, we don't have that information in elementary school, or, parents don't have that to be able to say, oh, well, of course, if you're eating sugar, then you might be more cranky later in the day, or you might have this, blood sugar high and blood sugar low, or this particular food is just not processed by your body well. And so your body is having an inflammation reaction. Like, that's just not a normal conversation around the dinner table in our society, right? And so then we grow up not knowing and not understanding. And Jill, as you said, there is a tendency to blame our bodies for that when we don't know why and what is happening internally, when we don't understand, like, oh, that's just the body saying, please, no more of this inflammatory stuff in my system. I'm trying to do the best I can. I think there's a tiger after me, but it's really, the boss, or the coworker, or the, mother-in-law, or whatever, that's causing that reaction for more cortisol to be released, and then not being able to process those foods in the same way. Like, as Kelly said, in that having the gut to be able to optimally function.
Right. And that we can be eating these amazingly nutrient dense foods, and our body's like, I don't have time. That's secondary right now. I'm kind of in a crisis. And so, we're going through all this trouble to purchase and find and cook and eat these foods. And then under the wrong circumstances, our body's not even, assimilating it or using the benefits from the food, which I think, and Kelly, what I think is so important that you said is, and Rebecca, is what we view as stress, what it used to be, and then what it is. And like, if we get into a car accident, or we lose a job or something like that, like, we can all agree that that's stressful, but it's really those day-to-day things that we don't even like consciously pick up as stress, like the many notifications on our phone and being stuck in traffic and all of that, and just kind of beats us up a little bit over time. And we don't even really know it's happening.
It becomes your status quo. So then you're not paying attention. And I do operate from the belief that your body starts to give you little signs. It will show you small discomforts. It will do small things. But then if you're not starting to listen and adjust a little bit, they will get bigger, and it will become more of an issue and more of an issue until, some people keep going down that road until they end up in adrenal fatigue, until they end up with diabetes. It's something that starts to show small bits, but then you will eventually, if you're not paying attention and trying to adjust things and listen to your body, something bigger happens later.
That's it starts off as a little knock, and then it's pounding on your door. Like, you will listen to me. You didn't listen to me before, but I'm going to make it happen. So, excellent.
And I think that's such a good point, that small taps, again, going back to because we don't know, because we're not taught that, we don't recognize, that little tap, tap, tap of the symptom of, wow, I wonder why I have these headaches, or, think, oh, it's just a headache. I'll just take this, Tylenol or ibuprofen or whatever. And then it's like, well, actually that's a symptom. That's the tap of there's something else that needs to be addressed.
Right. And getting to the root cause of
Right.
that, right? We're very good at like, there's an issue, I'm going to cover it up. But like your body shouldn't have headaches every day, right? Your skin shouldn't be, red and scaly. So why is that happening? And I would agree with you that just isn't something that we're taught. We're taught to bring our issue to another person and then they, fix that particular symptom. And we never really figure out and we're not even, it doesn't even dawn on us, to ask well, why is this happening? Why is my skin reacting like this? And so, getting to the root cause is not something that we're very good at, but oh my gosh, what an amazing process that is. And then you find out oh, all of these other things are actually a lot better as well. Now that I just, tried to get to, dig and figure out what's going on. So I want to ask, what of all the stuff that we're talking about, do you feel, or how do you feel this affects moms in particular? Because I think that's a big part of our audience. That's what the event is about. And they're definitely at the front and center of a lot of this, whether it's nutrition for the family or just the stress and, burden of family, responsibilities. Yeah. So how do you feel that maybe what we've been talking about so far, specifically relates to moms?
I think that there's so many different ways that as women and as moms that we have the ability to show up in this discussion. And so I think it's centered around being the caretakers of the family, being the caretakers of your parents, sometimes being the caretakers of your children. Largely, in a lot of families, you are also the person who is responsible for the groceries and for the meal preparations. And so not only those things, but also in my house anyway, you're also responsible for the discussions with the kids about why are we eating this? And so, some of those are all, it's so many different angles. We are just the holders of so many things, so many roles. We wear so many hats. And so, but they all can lead back to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think to piggyback off of that, Kelly, that's all the more reason why we need to take care of ourselves, right? I think so many times it's easy to be that overwhelmed, frazzled mom who is just picking up the crumbs off of kids' plates, when really we need to nourish ourselves. It's like when you're on the airplane, you have to put on your mask before you take care of those around you. I think the same thing goes with motherhood. And I would really love to break off that stigma of taking care of yourself and nourishing yourself is selfish, or there should be guilt or shame around that. Because if you're not able to do that for yourself, you're not able to do that as well as you could for your family.
That is so true. It's so true. Yeah. And it's not, again, it's society doesn't have that. Society has the expectation that we're supposed to, don't be selfish, right? You have to take care of others first, and then whatever's left over, you can take care of yourself. And really by having these discussions, we can start to shift. No, that's actually not what motherhood is. Motherhood is taking care and, like you said, nourishing yourself so that you can nourish and care for your children or your parents. I love, Kelly, that you said that too. Whoever you're caring for, your four-leggeds, right? Your pups or cats. We're nourishing so many people. And if we aren't filled up emotionally, spiritually, nutritiously, we aren't going to be able to take care of other individuals.
I agree. Go ahead, Kelly.
The other angle there too is setting, I think that one of the most important things that as parents, as moms, and especially for us in this conversation is the discussion around setting the example too. And so as we just sat here and said, we weren't taught those things. This was not a discussion that our parents had with us, not mine anyway. And in general, everything was viewed as just being in separate silos. Your emotions are this and your food is that. And, you were not at all introduced into this mind-body connection piece that we're, also kind of in a roundabout way discussing here too. And so having the discussions with your kids and having that, just instilling a little bit of that knowledge. And so I think that when we're talking about how much stress can play a role in all of those things during COVID and during this year in particular, it's, I see it both ways. I see it as, yes, we are more stressed, I think, in some ways. It depends where you ended up in terms of your geography and kind of where things are, where things went with, if you had little kids that you had to homeschool and do virtual schooling with, or if you didn't, or it is so multifaceted and complicated depending on where you were. But I think overall, it's such a stressful year. But I do think that the other side of that, the flip side of that, that was for a lot of families, they got to spend more time together. And we got to have more of those times when we could have those conversations and talk about, more of those talks about food and that kind of stuff during food time. And I like to talk about in the morning. Sometimes I say, okay, we're eating this. Why are we eating this today? We're going to eat this today because I like to start the day with something that I know doesn't make my blood sugar go up. I literally say that to my kids. And so it's because I want them to hear that and to say it back later. I'm not kidding. I'm going to be like, they're going to be the kids that are like, my blood sugar is going up. So that's
which is awesome. That's fantastic.
Well, they can be friends with my son because he's open to that conversation.
Mine too.
Or mine, I'll confess.
Yeah. But I think that we hold all those roles. And I think that this year in particular was it could have been, you could have had so much more stress, but also in that same experience also had this other element of more time and more quality time. So it impacted so many ways for our families and our moms.
And I think also the discussion around nutrition could, and I agree, about blood sugar, or this is, choices, but it was also about like, how can we keep our bodies healthy when there is this virus that's around, that like we can actually do things to build our immunity, that we can eat, my son would say something about, sugar. And it was like, you know what? Sugar doesn't really do a great job when you're trying to build your immune system. Lots of people are sick right now. Let's try to, dial that back so that you can have the healthiest body in case you do get exposed to that virus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this is a good shift into, because my next question was, how has the last year impacted us? And I think that Kelly, you're right in that it's such a different experience depending on who you are. Some people got to take a step back and loosen up their schedule a little bit. Some people got more piled on their plate. The stress is different no matter what. And I saw a stat. So this is prior to COVID, but mothers working full time spend 50% more time each day caring for children than fathers working full time. So back to the how does that impact moms? And we've got several things, always trying to balance. And I was thinking, when the roles shifted over the past, say, 100 years, right, where women are now, in the workforce, but there's still home stuff to be done. And while, fathers, dads can help, and it seems like it's perceived as helping, and supporting and doing a favor almost. Whereas the women who are going to work, I don't have my husband helping me, and jumping in. Right. So it's maybe the shift, the balance is off. We were stepping into the workplace full force, but still having, this work at home. And Kelly, to your point about having the conversations with nutrition, it is really a long game, right? It is really long term. We're not going to get them to go from, sugary treats to vegetables in one meal or even 1 week or 1 month. It's really lifelong, conversation. So I'd love to kind of really take a more deep dive into what has the last year done. And Kelly, you introduced it. So Rebecca or Melissa, if you want to jump in with either stress or nutrition or the combination or moms in general, where do you feel this last year's put us?
Go ahead, Melissa.
I feel like what I see is, and this is just basing it off of conversations and social media, is there's a lot of numbing. We're numbing with sugar, or we are maybe shopping online, like we're doing something to kind of self-soothe and make ourselves feel better. That's just based on my perception of what I've seen. I haven't done that like I would have a few years ago, so that's encouraging. But I think for me personally, it's brought a lot of things to light, like we were talking about immune support and teaching kids, like, this is why we're taking these supplements. This is why you're taking oranges in your lunch. This is why we're doing what we're doing, because of where we're at and the impact that you can have proactively on your health.
Definitely.
Yeah, for
Rebecca,
sure.
anything to add?
Yeah, I just want to echo that, because I think, as we've just been saying, is, it was a very stressful year. I was one of the moms that was kids at home trying to do that, plus working, plus having a business. It was quite full. And I could see in my own experience, like there was some tendency of like, okay, how can I deal with this? Even though I had all these tools, some of the tools either weren't working in the way that they used to. I was like, well, okay, I'll just go take time for myself. And it's like, well, how am I going to take time for myself when the kids are home 100% of the time? And I am the one who is taking care of making sure that they are at the computer when school is on, or that, they don't need help with the, whatever I was building with some science experiment one day in class with them. And I was like, I have a client, like, how am I no, I can't get you a straw. So, right. That it was having to find new ways. I think that's the resilience piece too, of like, okay, there's an awareness, right? That's not working. I have this, I'm noticing my tendency to go numb, right? With either food, we can numb with food, we can numb with shopping, we can numb with social media, we can numb with a bazillion different things, right? Alcohol, right? That's a big one that people are like, oh, it's 1:00 already. And noticing like, okay, is that the choice I want to make right now? Is that what love would do? Is that the way, okay, my usual coping mechanism isn't available. What would be available? If 5 minutes of closing the door in the bathroom, okay, like, yep, I can do that. Turning on my amazing sister bought headphones that were sound canceling headphones. It's like a little mini retreat in my office because I couldn't hear. I know, right?
Yes.
Right? So it was like, okay, I had to look at what food is going to support my body, what movement is going to support my body, what things can I do to support my emotions, what things can I do to support my mind, right? Instead of, oh my gosh, this is going to go on forever. Was I'm so glad I get to spend this extra time with my children, and I need to take care of myself, right? So working on all of those pieces together, and noise canceling headphones, that I think that we really are, as women, as mothers, this is where real change happens in the society. It's like I feel like it's such a turning point right now that yes, COVID is really challenging and in some ways damaging. And it's like the place where everything can change if, and I really feel this is true, women take that extra little step in that kind of like from the bottom up, right? Instead of the top down, the bottom up, teaching the kids, this is how mommy's dealing with stress. Let's go meditate together. We have to get our bodies outside. You don't have your school recess to do that. You're home with me. We're going to get the body outside and move, right?
Wouldn't it be great if we got to the point where we were having conversations and bragging about how much self-care we were doing, not like how much coffee we needed to get through the day or how many nights we haven't slept in a row. And I think we're getting there slowly. I think more and more, women and men, but I think we're realizing that's where it's at. That's how only way we're going to move forward and thrive is if we do take care of ourselves. So that's what I hope is that we could get it together at a party or, at somebody's house and have conversations about the great things we're doing for ourselves, without people being like, oh, must be great, or must be nice, and having that supportive conversation, because it's hard when you're the only one in a group or, at work or whatever, that's like, that wants to take care of themselves, and you don't have that support system or people that understand why can't you just work late? Why can't you just take on one more thing, and saying no, that's not smiled upon so often. Right. And I think that's slowly changing, but I think that's a big part of it is, for us as moms to start, but really everybody to, relax their schedule, take on the amount of, stuff that you can take on. And I think it'll be interesting, we're not quite out of the woods yet. And, who knows when we will be or what normal we'll go back to, but it'll be interesting to see, I think, families as far as like how they schedule moving forward. Like, will they have somebody in, their kids in activities 5 days a week? I could see it going either way, right? Because it's like, I've been home with them for a year, as many activities as possible. But I also enjoy not driving somewhere 5 nights a week and, having dinner on the road and, things like that. So we'll see how this turns out. And that kind of leads to like, we're not done with this because COVID is, on its way down or, cut to a year from now. All the things we're talking about are still going to be very relevant. So yes. I don't know if any of you want to speak to that. Like this is also the long game, right?
Right. Totally. I think, and I think what you just touched on, Jill, too, is just how there were it was a breakdown of boundaries. So there were, clear boundaries before. If you didn't work from home, especially, you went to your office and then you came home. And for most people, you had family time and it was separate. But then suddenly it was this intermixing of everything. The kids didn't have school separate, you didn't have work separate. And there was all this intermixing of boundaries. And I think some of what Rebecca was saying too, was talking about building the boundary for yourself to say, this is mommy's time, and showing the example for that, which I think was super huge in terms of a realization and creating a new way around something that you didn't have to worry about before. You had to get creative. Those noise canceling headphones were a birthday present that someone gave me. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I thought, this is amazing because it really did. It was like, well, mommy has these on. This is my time for a minute. And I needed that. And it was very helpful. But I think that going forward, I am curious to see in my area, so I still work in the hospital. So that was also an added layer in my house because I was dealing with it in the hospital. And then I was not working from home to be able to figure it out with my husband. It literally dumped on him when I left. So there weren't grandparents coming in, that was it. So there's those parents too, like me, who needed to leave to go to work in the middle of the pandemic. And then just the fallout from that was a higher level of stress. But I do wonder, and I think that I'm watching some of it in the request for people to come back to the office, in the request for moms and dads to come back in. I'm watching some people decide to change jobs because they have decided that they're drawing a boundary around that. And they realize that they don't want to commute, an hour one way anymore, and that they have a different quality of life and that they want to hold on to it. And so I think that for those things, I hold them in this little palm of my hand and think, oh my gosh, I love that so much, because I want people to walk into, if that's their way of putting the boundary around it and saying, no, like I need this for my next journey in my life and my role as a parent. I love that. I love people standing up and realizing something that's choosing better for them. So that's what I have to say about that.
I don't know about you ladies, but I feel like the word that I adopted during this year has been pivot. And I love that because it's not like you're, starting from scratch. It's all new. You're just changing direction a little bit. And that gives you so much freedom and so much power. And it doesn't have to be like a complete 180, but just a smidge. Like, I don't know. I feel like that's my new word.
It's good. And some of it can be self-imposed, right? Like I'm choosing to pivot. And now I think we've been able to see our resilience when wasn't our choice to pivot. Like we got a couple days notice and your children will be home with you at the end,
Right.
And so it's been a learning experience for me. I think a lot of, people that I know, and not only with kids, but, with jobs or finances, I saw that 2 million women since the start of the pandemic have dropped out of the workforce. And of them, most of them have been unemployed for 26 weeks or more. And that is not including the women that decreased their hours, right? So some of us, we're still in the workforce, but we're not working 8 hours a day. We might be working 4, or we might be working 3 days a week. And so, financial stress, like how do you pivot with that? At least we're not going to like 5 activities or any parties or anything like that. So we're able to save, but I see that as a stress too, and the uncertainty of, whether it's a mom or a dad or just any human wondering if their business, if the place they work for, if their job is, stable, and just having that, even if you go to work every day, you're like, could be tomorrow, could be tomorrow, could be tomorrow. I mean, what a heavy load to carry, for a lot of us.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that, I don't know if you see that Tina posted a question in the Q&A or a comment. That might be a lot, right? That uncertainty that hangs out. And she says she's a busy divorced mom who's overwhelmed trying to keep healthy food on the table, right? That there's when we have that uncertainty or that, I'm dumping everything, either everything gets dumped on me or I dump everything on my partner, or I don't have a partner to dump it on and I have to figure out how to manage it all, right? The single moms, divorced moms, that is very true. And I know that, speaking to your question, Tina, or to your comment, one of the things that I think can happen is as women, we try to go all in, right? Like it has to be 100% amazingly beautiful, nutritious, food. And maybe we're way away from that standard. And so, thinking about what small thing can you incorporate can maybe help deal with some of the overwhelm instead of thinking it has to be 100% organic and I have to fresh cook it myself. Maybe it's what's one vegetable I can add, right? What's one thing I can add to help increase the nutritional value of what I'm doing? Because we don't need the extra stress of beating ourselves up over what we can and can't do. That perfection is also, I've heard people say that that's a symptom of the patriarchy, is that women have to be perfect and then otherwise we're not good enough. And so it was a way of kind of keeping women down. And we don't need that. that is like, we just don't. And I mean, it's what's ingrained in us. So of course we have that. So, just trying to take small steps in how you can incorporate what you value into, whether it's food or talking with your children or stress reduction or finding time for yourself. One vegetable, 1 minute of quiet, 1 minute of meditation, small steps is usually the biggest change, that way that my clients make change.
Small hinges open wide doors. So don't ever underestimate the power of those small changes, because it still has the same impact.
That's great. I love that. And I think too, probably all of us that, see clients or work with, people that have, a number of challenges, it's surprising even to me sometimes, but to them especially, what one change, like what an impact that could have. If it's, drinking water for the, X amount of water, or just like you said, adding that one vegetable, it can be really impactful. And so, but I agree, we're very much, like an all or nothing. A lot of us are like that, right? Like we're either on the diet or we're off the diet. Like there's no middle ground where it's like, I might want to sneak that one vegetable and it's like, yes or no. And to break from that is a challenge, because it's just how a lot of us are programmed. So I think that's really great. Small steps is my jam. Like I think they're so sustainable, right? Yes. And, and so maybe we can start going into like solutions, right? And so if we come up with more problems, which we certainly can, we can add to it. But I think, something like taking small steps, one of the challenges is that, well, today seemed a lot like yesterday, and yesterday really seemed a lot like the day before, and the day before seemed a lot like the day before that. And like, am I getting anywhere? So what do you say, those of you who have clients and work with them over time, like, what do you say to people that are like, well, I don't even know if it's working?
Well, I would say, I don't know who was going to jump in first.
I know, we were all like, yeah, we could.
I think that I always like to approach it from having a standpoint in the very beginning of the journey, looking at where you are and kind of having that awareness, bringing awareness to where you are in the beginning, and then referencing back to that when we are going through the journey. And so where were we now? Where are we now with how are you feeling about what you're eating? How are you feeling emotionally, et cetera, et cetera. And then let's look back at where we were at the beginning and having a comparison, because sometimes it's so hard to see from day to day, but you really are making these shifts. And it's very important to have the feeling that you're making progress, but you don't always see it when you try to look closely. You have to zoom out a little bit.
And Kelly, I have a question, if you can expand on that a little bit. Like, if what are some things specifically that like I could look for? Because like, say digestive upset, like if we eat something and it doesn't agree with us, like we pretty much know right away. But like, what are some of the other factors in my day-to-day life that I could look at to know like, oh, I should compare this to 3 months ago, or I should compare this? Like, do you have any suggestions on like what the details are, the specifics?
Sure. So it depends probably exactly where you started, but I would think that if in the beginning you wanted to try something because you were having GI upset, you were having upset stomachs, or you were having indigestion, heartburn, diarrhea, anything like that. So if we're talking about this in the GI realm, especially, we can talk about what symptoms you started with, and then really getting into specifics in the beginning of, I want you to write down how often this happens, keep a log of exactly how often it's happening. So you have a numerical value. This was happening exactly, this many times in this week, and this happened this many times this week, and things like that, so that you can look back and do another check or another log on, 1 month in and 2 months in, so that you can say, okay, look at the numbers, look at the difference in the numbers, and you can see the difference in a very concrete way. It's not just kind of like, oh, I thought I felt this and now I don't, or, it's hard. If you make it wishy-washy, it'll be wishy-washy. But if you try to give it a value, then it's much more digestible.
Exactly.
Pun intended.
Pun intended. I like that.
And I think too, there's value in having someone outside looking in, speaking into your situation, because sometimes we're so close, we're so in the thick of it that we maybe can't see what we've done or where we were and where we're at now. And so to have somebody to journey with you and kind of call that out, I think is really helpful.
I think so too.
Agreed. And it's when a symptom's not happening anymore, it's easy to forget that it ever happened.
It's
right?
so easy.
Like I have, people look back at like what symptoms they checked, right, at, 3 months ago, and they're like, oh my God, I was having headaches. I just haven't had them anymore. And so I forget. And I think for somebody who's trying to make a change, doing that kind of tracking is like, it's motivational, right? And it's evidence that you are getting somewhere, because when it's not happening anymore, it's like, I just didn't even think about it because I woke up feeling totally fine, or I didn't need to take a nap at 2:00 in the afternoon and I just got through my day. But those kind of things don't register all the time.
Yep. And I think that can be really helpful too. I think log is one of the most important things, logging symptoms, but also logging like what you were eating, kind of as a pre and maybe not midline, right? Like when you're in the middle of whatever you're doing, maybe not, I don't know if there ever really is a post, but to notice like, oh, I'm not eating the same things. Like even that can be validation. Like, oh, I've shifted what I'm putting into my body. Even, maybe you don't have a lot of symptoms, maybe just know that you want to change what you're eating or you want to eat healthier. It's like, oh, look, I am eating, instead of one vegetable every 3 or 4 days, I'm having a vegetable a day or 3 vegetables a day or, whatever it is, just being able to see that on paper can also, when it can be connected to, and like the other things that you're doing, I'm exercising more, right? Now I have more energy. Like you can write those things down. Or the big one that I usually see with my clients is I'm sleeping better, right? Like that I change what I eat and therefore, I'm sleeping better, which means they're going to exercise more, which means they're not as grumpy, right? All of those things, this little cascade. And when you write that down, just as Kelly said, and Jill, you said, you can take a moment to reflect on it. And that reflection with someone else, because they're going to remind you, is such a nice, you can do it on your own too, but it's nice to have somebody there to say, tap, tap, tap. Remember when you first started coming to see me and you didn't want to exercise and now you're exercising 15 minutes a day? Yeah, that's huge. And give that validation.
Absolutely. It's more fun with somebody else. Let's just be honest.
So much more fun. Yeah. Someone cheering you on and like supporting you when it's challenging. It's way better. I don't know how people do it on their own anymore.
Yeah. Well, I like to hear, like Kelly, like you said, that, you're having those conversations with your kids, because this is like the long, long game, right? So like, I know a lot of moms, a lot of women, and, to be honest, men, just individuals that live in, either a family or a roommate situation where one person's on board and that's it, right? And it is an uphill battle when you're the only one who wants to eat healthy. You're either making 2 meals or you're tempted by the snacks that are there that you don't really want there, but that are there. Or you don't have that support and understanding, like, why are you spending 2 hours on a Sunday prepping food? Like, we want to go, we have other things to do. And so I think it's so important, like that support system around you. Do you guys have any advice on where to find people, tips and tricks on getting that support, that network behind you?
That's a really great question. Because I do think, what I find is that it is challenging to find other people who want to make these changes, like who are fed up enough. I think that's the word I want to use, right? Where people are ready to say, like, it's different. My experience has been connecting people that, like in my community, for instance, connecting other people that I know that are also trying to do the same thing, whether that be in an online community or in a local community, of, being able to just find other women who, it doesn't have to be women, but mostly I work with women, to find other women who are like, yeah, I want to nourish my body and my children's body. So yes, I'm going to do the food prep on Sunday for X number of hours because I don't have that time during the week. I'm going to have foods in the fridge that I can just grab and stick, in the oven to reheat. I think that is really, and having a plan, I think this is why coaching is so helpful, is you can work with a person to come up with a plan that is doable, right? And having that support can be really helpful too.
The amount of information out there is overwhelming. I mean, good, bad, and otherwise. There's lots of good information that conflicts. There's a lot of total information that conflicts. And so I think, maybe we can kind of wrap it up with like that one step or a couple of action items, that somebody who is like, I don't know, I read that eggs are bad and then avocados are good and everybody hates coconuts now. And like, it's like, who knows what is what, and they just are like, gives them the opportunity, I think, to raise the white flag and be like, I'm just not going to do anything because I don't even know where to start. So maybe we can, all kind of chime in on like, if you're going to do one thing or just a mindset of like, well, how do you take that first step? How do you sort through the overwhelm?
I usually just start by saying, just pick one thing at a time. So like, if you know that your snacks, like if I snack, I do okay because I'll bring my lunch, but then I snack. And then, so we'll say, okay, what do you want to do then? Like, let's focus on that. And then just do that first. And then kind of do one thing at a time. And all changes are made through small steps. and all sustainable change is made through small steps, kind of like we were all saying before. And usually I also just go with a very general, easy approach of you can't go wrong if it's, grown from the ground or plucked from a tree. Like, you can't go wrong with that. It's really like just you're incorporating more of that. And if you want to I don't get drilled down into this discussion on counting things or doing too much of that. Usually I just kind of do a zoomed out general mindset of try to eat more fruits and vegetables than processed stuff, and try to replace some of your processed stuff. And so kind of starting there in a general sense, and then giving ideas on how to do that first step. So that's a first step for me.
That's great. Melissa, Rebecca?
Yeah, I think for me, it's one size doesn't fit all. So what works for one doesn't work for all. And you may see that eggs are this or avocados are that, but I think the key is really knowing what works for you and your unique body type. So my biggest piece of advice or nugget is to slow down and learn to listen to your body. We all spoke a little bit earlier on they're tapping at us. Our bodies are always talking. We just don't know how to listen to them. So there's power in the pause. So slow down and listen to what your body has to say and decipher it that way. That's a really good starting point.
I love that. And it needs to be taught, really. That's why it can be helpful to work with a coach or a practitioner that can look, be your mirror. You see that, that's something. You see that, that's something. Because I think, unless somebody, has an acute illness or, some severe injury, they'll tell you they're fine. I'm fine. It's like, what about these 9 things? But they just don't know, like you said, that's an indication of something going on. So, working with somebody that can be that mirror to you, and then, further empower you to do that, for the rest of your life. It's a skill you can take with you forever. Once you get it, and once you're in tune to it, it's so empowering. I love that. I love feeling that way. And I love helping people notice that they have a lot more control, I think, than they realize in how they feel.
We're our own best health experts. I mean, that's
yes.
For sure.
And when you figure out that you can make that difference, it feels so good. It's awesome.
It's so empowering, which is the opposite of what you were talking about, what we were all talking about before, right? Of that, we need to go outside to get that information. Instead, it's really looking within of, when I do eat that thing, I notice the next day, that's when I have headaches, or that's when I am really stuffy the next day, or I'm falling asleep at 10 o'clock in the morning, even though I've had, 8 hours of sleep. It's that combination. I love, what both Kelly and Melissa, what you were saying about small steps and listening, those two things together. And there are some real general pieces of if it is grown. What did you say, Kelly? If it's grown if it's grown in the ground or comes from a tree, you're pretty much right. Yes, natural whole foods. The more at the root origin, that's a really good place. If you're unsure, that's a great place to start. And it is starting where you are. If you're eating Big Macs 3 times a day, then maybe it is too much to shift completely all at once. You have to know for you. I'm one of those people who I was eating Big Macs and hot dogs and Cokes. And then I was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. And I switched to everything. But some people, they can't make those big changes, and they need, I'm going to add carrot sticks. I'm going to add one thing or one less Big Mac to be able to make the change, one less eating out meal, that little tiny things, identifying what is possible for you. What feels, my teacher would say, take what feels easy, cut that in half, and then cut it in half again. And that's your small step, right? That's where we think, it's easy. I'll meditate 30 minutes a day. And it's like, no, that's not a small step. Yeah. That's gigantic if you haven't been meditating, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you haven't been eating fruits and vegetables, that might be a really big step. So finding what works for you, small steps, and listening to your body. I think those are all really key pieces.
Yeah. So I think if you take on too much, right, then you go into the stress. Like now we're adding more stress because it's like, I don't know how to cook vegetables. I don't know how to, and so we've taken somebody who's probably already stressed because most of us are. And now we're like, and pile on this whole project that, you're going to do every day. So there are some people, Rebecca, like you said, that are like, I'm going to make a change and that's the end of it. And that's great. Like, that's wonderful, but I think a lot of people would see that as overwhelming. And so the idea that you all mentioned of like how impactful it can be to take one step and how simple, not easy, but simple. Right. And the simple steps, I think, we have had a tendency to make health and wellness and, eating better or stress management, like really complicated. You have to, do this schedule, or you have to, write down all this stuff, or, it's this 7 steps to blah, 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 and it's like, that can be really overwhelming when it's really these very foundational steps. I think sometimes that can have a big impact.
And I think it can be helpful to have like 1 or 2 people that you really trust, that you can follow that information to, instead of trying to gather. I think that's one of the things about social media is we're like, oh, I'm not supposed to eat whatever now. And, but if you have 1 person or 2 people that you're like, okay, I know that's a functional nutritionist, or I know that's an integrative wellness provider, and they're saying this, the same thing over and over again, healthy, whole foods, then, okay, I just need to remember healthy, whole foods, not counting calories, not, blah, 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 all those things that go in and out of fashion, right? I think that can be a way to kind of dial down the overwhelm that a lot of people can experience.
Definitely. Well, we have just a few minutes left, and I want to make sure that everybody knows how to get a hold of you all. So if you could go around, I'll start with you, Rebecca, and just if you have a website, I know you have several ways to get in touch with you. And I think once the recording is available, all of our information will be there, but just to let us know what the easiest way is to get a hold of you, how to connect with you would be really helpful.
Yeah, you can. I have a podcast. That's an easiest way to kind of hear, as I was saying, one person that you can follow. It's called Whole Body Upgrade, or you can find me on my website. It's centeredyou.com. And you can always reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram, or, message me on any of those places as well.
That's awesome. Thank you. Kelly, how can we get a hold of you?
I am on Facebook and Instagram. I'm at The Whole Calm. And I also have a website, which is energytothrivetribe.com. And so there's a number 2 in there, energy2thrivetribe.com.
That's a great name.
Thank you.
I'm Melissa.
I also have a 2 in my website, Kelly. My website is free, the number 2, the letter B, coaching.com. So freebecoaching.com. On Facebook, I'm Happy Healthy Mama. I have a podcast called Mondays with Melissa. So any of those places.
That's awesome. I feel, Rebecca, we don't have a number in our website.
I gotta shift that.
I'm going to add one at the end. Well, I'm Jill Baccaro. I'm Wellness Riot. You can find me all over the place looking under Wellness Riot. And I just wanted to thank you all speakers. Thank you everyone that is watching, everyone that will watch, Tina for asking questions. This has been so fun and so inspiring to talk to other women that really are in alignment with, I think, what is going to make us happy and healthy for the long term in the future. So thank you all very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and happy Amplifying Her Voice Mother's Day Summit to you all.
Thanks so much, Jill.
Bye, everybody.
Everyone. Bye.